Hi there. My name is Melissa Moore, and I'm a PhD student at the University of Glasgow. Today, I'm going to give a presentation about how to give a good presentation. This talk is going to cover what information to put on your slides, how to design a good slide, presenting your slides, and online versus live presentation. Now, this is initially intended for the Environmental Engineering 1 course here at the University of Glasgow. Hello, everybody. I've already met with you many times, but I think it's useful for anybody. So that is why I'm going to be putting this on YouTube for people outside the course to be able to view as well. So let's get started. First thing, why do we make posters and presentations? Well, you have just spent the last few months doing all of this reading and working with your group and research and put together this really interesting proposal for your engineering challenge. And now it's time to tell other people about all this great work you've done. But this is really complicated work, and you've put a lot of intricate design into this. So if you just talk about it, it's gonna get really boring. So what we want to do is make sure that your readers stayed really engaged. And we do this by adding visuals. People are visual thinkers. We like to look at the world around us. So by adding visuals to our presentation, it makes people happy. And happy people do better science. So briefly, what is a presentation? Well, it's a visual representation of your work. It helps increase communication of all of the research that you have done up to this point, and it helps other people make good science. Another way to think about it, the work that you are presenting, the presentation that you are making is a mental image of what you want your audience to be thinking about. Those are the kinds of things you put in a presentation. So, what kind of information are you going to include? Well, first thing is to look at your marking criteria or your grading rubric. Secondly, look at the description for your specific assignment. And finally, think about the kinds of questions your instructor might ask you. Now, for this class, this is the marking criteria. You have this online, so I'm not going to go into a lot of detail about it. But this is the information that's really key that you want to pay attention to. It's looking for, have you taken into account the community context or this specific society? Have you looked at the environmental context? Have you taken into account the weather, the geology, etc.? Have you taken the economic context into account? Have you thought about what's the income like in this area? What kind of industry does it have? Are you able to demonstrate a methodological assessment? Can you show the logic behind what you did? Can you describe how you are going to get this from being just an idea to actually being put in place and built? And finally, can you show that you have done critical thinking about why the design choice that you have chosen is the best one to have chosen? Next, it's good to look at the project description. So what are your assignments that you have looked at? There's lots of different things you have on the Moodle, and some of them ask questions like, why do you need this project? Who is this client? How is this project relevant to their lives? And so on. Again, these are all going to be on your Moodle. So look at the Moodle. This is going to give you a really good indication of the types of information you're going to need to have in your presentation. But what about questions from your marker? The whole purpose of this presentation is going to be an opportunity for you and your teacher and a panel of other people, as well as your other classmates, to ask you questions about the work that you have done. These questions might be, tell me some more about the location that you're working in, or tell me some more a bit about the designs that you're doing. Put this kind of information into your presentation if you think that it's appropriate to. But sometimes you can't include it. Either it's just too detailed, or maybe it's not your research you're talking about, someone else's research that you have updated. Well, make sure to have references to those ready to go and be able to answer those questions as they come up. Again, please have references that you think are going to be relevant ready in case somebody asks you one of these questions. So now let's talk about how to design a good slide. Now, the study of design is called aesthetics, and this talks about how to describe the look and flow of your poster or your slides. This talks about things like text, images, graphs, colors, and the layout of everything. Now, aesthetics as far as text, you really want to have simple fonts that are sans serif, meaning they don't have the little bits that stick out at the top and bottom. These are like Arial or Myriad Pro, like I have here. Here's some good examples of good titles to use and good types of text and some really fiddly bad text. One of the great advantages about having text like this is if you're dyslexic like I am, then having simple sans serif text is going to be easier to read really quickly. And remember, the whole purpose of this is delivering information as fast as you can. Also think about your font size. If you're doing a slide, make sure it's easy to read from a couple steps away. That means that if someone's sitting at their screen, they'll be able to read it very quickly and take in the information effectively. If you're doing a poster, there's a bunch of different heading sizes that you're going to need. I recommend stopping the video now and writing these down. Also, when you're going to be putting your text on a screen, either for a presentation or for a poster, split them into columns and text boxes. This minimizes the amount that your eyes have to move around the screen. And again, it makes it easier to read fast. But finally, and the most important one, less is more. You want to put in as little as you can on your slide, simply so that there's less information to take in. Going back to what we were talking about before, right now, I want you to think about thinking. So I have put a picture of a brain on the screen, and this is going to give you the memory of, oh, thinking, brains, and all of that. That's going to be much more memorable and impactful than a wall of text that they're not actually going to read, and it's going to be really difficult to actually take in easily. If I give you a wall of text, you're just going to remember a rectangle as opposed to a brain. So use a picture in place of text if you can. When you do put text on, what should it look like? What kind of text should you put? Well, use bullet points. If you can, use short sentences. Even better, incomplete sentences, just your key points. And remember to highlight any of the key words in either bold or just lit up, and only put the essential information on here. Now, if you look at this slide as an example, you notice that there's only a few different points that I have put on the slide while I am talking and saying things that don't appear anywhere on here. The point of this is I want you to remember just the key points and sort of the ideas, the broad ideas that I am saying out loud. But these things together with the visual are going to create a really solid memory that people can take and bring with them into their future work. Another way to put this is KISS. Keep it simple, stupid. I was raised on this method, and I'm guessing you guys have probably heard this before. Now, if you can replace your text with an image, even better. In your projects, this will probably look like a diagram that's showing you how a septic tank works. Or maybe it's a location and a map of where you're going to put your work. Or if you're doing something that's a bit esoteric or maybe new to your audience, having a diagram explaining how this technology works is going to be another really great way to demonstrate both that you understand what you're talking about and to effectively convey this to your audience and, most importantly, your markers. So map, CAD, diagram. Again, a picture is worth 1,000 words. So a simple picture, pizza good, is going to convey a lot more information than wall of text, which is bad. You're just going to remember a rectangle as opposed to delicious pizza. Now, thinking about what kind of colors do I use, make sure to have lots of contrast. This usually looks like a dark font on a light background. It's important to really avoid clashes in color like you have on this really awful example I have up here. Yeah, sometimes you'll see yellow on blue, but it's really not easy to read, and it gives you a headache if you stare at it too hard. If you have somebody who has issues with color blindness, for example, having lots of color in your presentation makes it really difficult for them to read and makes the information that you're putting out look really muddy. So if you can, I would avoid using lots of color on your graphs, on your presentation, unless they're serving a very specific point. If you want, the University of Glasgow has lots of different PowerPoint templates that you can use to help guide you through making a really good presentation. Either just type into Google University of Glasgow PowerPoint templates and it should bring this page up, or this is the link. Feel free to pause the video here and write this link down. If you're going to be doing a poster, layout is even more important. Unlike a presentation where I am guiding the viewer through what they need to know, in a poster, the reader needs to guide themselves. So it's really important to be able to separate out the different parts of your text and to have arrows or numbers or simple layout to guide them from one part to the next part. Also, using negative space is really useful to help give your reader more space in order to figure out where to go from one place to the next place. It's also easier on the eyes and easier to read when you're going really fast. Now, you may have noticed on previous slides, I made a point of separating out my text. I didn't do that on this one, and that was intentional because I wanted you to see what all of your text bunched up in a corner looks like, with that big bit of negative space at the bottom where there's nothing there. I could have spread this text out a bit more and it would have been a lot easier to read. Here's an example of something you shouldn't do. This is a really busy background and it's got a red text on blue that's really painful to read, and long sentences with serif font that's all small and fiddly. And while there's a lot of information here, it's really difficult to pick out what the important thing is or what is it I'm trying to say. This slide has the exact same information on it, but it's a lot easier to read what I'm trying to say. I have a map to show you this is the area, and I have columns to show you the theme and the subject. Now, this is just some made up information that I have, but your information might look similar to this. And this could be an example of a slide that's summarizing your project before you get into some more detail, where you might have some of the layouts or diagrams that we talked about before. Next, how to present your work. Now, before I studied science, I actually started my career out in radio. I spent 5 years talking live on air for my job. And this was actually a really great career, except that this is before YouTube and podcasting, so there was no money in it, which is why I decided to do science. Anyway, I'm going to teach you now about many of the tips and tricks that I learned to help me effectively speak on air live off the top of my head on a daily basis. The first thing is slow down. Public speaking is really hard and it's really easy to get really nervous. And when you get nervous, you tend to talk really fast. And the faster you talk, you forget things and you get muddled up and it's hard to understand and it's not very good. So it's important to slow down. And this gives you a chance to think and the audience a chance to listen. And one of the ways we do this is by paying attention and by breathing in between our sentences and our points. The way you do this is you say your sentence, make your point, and then you take a breath. And then you say your next point. And then you take another breath. And then you say your next point. This has several different functions. It forces you to slow down by adding breaks. Next, it allows you to breathe so you can get more oxygen. And when you have more oxygen, it lowers your adrenaline levels. This is that like the biology rushing through you, making you really nervous and your palms all sweaty and you get all foggy brained. No. Take a breath, calm down. You guys have put so much work into this project that you owe it to yourself to calm down and effectively deliver all of this research to your markers and to your classmates. Breathing gives you an opportunity to calm down and do your best work. Be calm. You can do it. Finally, it gives your audience a time to think about what you've said. Again, if you're just rushing through your work, then your audience isn't going to get a chance to think about what you're saying because you've already moved on to the next point. You're trying to show what you want to say next because there's so many things to say. But if you stop and you breathe and you slow down, your audience has a chance to do that imagining that we talked about earlier. If you're talking about a septic tank, they can picture, oh, that's what a septic tank looks like. Oh, I see, if they're not getting enough water through here, if you add this process, then it makes sense what you're talking about. So making a point of breathing in between your points and your sentences, it doesn't have to be a long breath, but breathing gives you a chance to slow down and do your best work. The next point is to talk just to one person. Now, there are two really scary types of public speaking. The first is a room full of people. It doesn't really matter who these people are. They could be your friends or classmates or strangers. Talking to a room full of people is terrifying. It's also terrifying to not be able to tell what they're thinking. Talking on Zoom and talking on the radio is both of these conditions combined, and it can be so nerve-wracking. So the way that we were trained when I was working in radio to deal with this is just to think of one person. Now, maybe you're talking to your mom, maybe it's your best friend, maybe it's your roommate, maybe it's your dog. It doesn't really matter, but find one person you trust and picture that you're talking just to them and they love your talk. And ignore the haters, because haters gonna hate, right? So don't think about all the people that might not be liking your talk. Think about the people who love your talk and talk slowly to them. And if you picture them loving your talk, it will do wonders. And still, when I'm presenting my research to my colleagues, I still have to remind myself to do this. I look at my supervisor because I know she's going to be in the audience smiling back at me. Now, this isn't as easy over Zoom, but that's okay. You still just put that person in your mind, even if they're not physically there in the room with you. And either way, it's going to work great. I highly recommend it. Now, the next one is a bit contentious. Don't use your notes. No notes. Your slides should be your notes. If your slides are well designed, they are going to have the cues in there to tell you what you need to say. Picture a public speaker, someone who's really good at it. Maybe this is your pastor or an actor or a singer you really like, or maybe it's just your teacher, a friend who's really good at telling jokes. I'm pretty sure they don't use notes. They look at the audience. They make eye contact. If you're reading from notes, you're not able to do this. And maybe you're thinking, hey, I'm on Zoom. You won't know. You can tell. It's easy to tell the people who are reading from their notes or the people who know their work and don't need to use notes because they can just tell you about it. And you guys have put in so much work up to this point. I've talked to every single one of you. And I know, based on our conversations, that you should be able to do this without notes by this point. I know you can do it. You need to know you can do it. The other advantage is that having a natural, more conversational flow is what happens when you don't use your notes and you can just talk off the top of your head. And if you have this more natural conversational flow, it's going to be more memorable because this is the way people talk. And so this is going to be the way our brains are most likely going to be able to remember the things that you're saying. Next, don't read your slides. Again, if you have designed your slides in the way that we've talked about so far, you shouldn't be able to read your slides. Your slides should just remind you what you want to say. And you shouldn't have that much text on your slide. If you've got enough text on your slide, do you just read them verbatim? Well, it's not going to be a very easy to read slide. But if you're well prepared, this should be really easy to do. So how do you do this? Well, you practice and 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 you practice. Practicing is the key to all of this. When you practice, It'll be easy to do this without notes because you know what you're saying. When you practice, you're going to know your cues really well. When you practice, you're going to think of the questions people might ask you and you're going to be ready for them because you've asked yourself those questions. When you practice, you find the parts you've missed. And when you practice, it gives you the confidence to know you can do this because you've already done it. So how much do you need to practice? I say at least 4 times, at least. But practice until you're ready. I have practiced this talk easily 6 times, but each time I do it, I think of a slightly different way to say something, or I'll think of a different way to put that picture up, or maybe I'll change the order of some of the pictures that I've put up. But every time I practice, I get a little bit more confident and it's a little bit easier to say this talk. Now, do you want to do this pre-recorded or do you want to do it live? Now, there are advantages and disadvantages to both of these. If you do it live, you don't get a chance to fix your mistakes. There's more pressure because you know people are listening to you, but you only have to do it once. If it's pre-recorded, you can fix your mistakes. You can go back and do it again. There's less pressure because no one's staring at you, but it's more time consuming because you have to do it multiple times. And there's more opportunity for technical difficulties, but you do get a chance to go back and look at it again later. Maybe you don't want to listen to yourself talk, but in a couple of years, this information could be really useful to you. So having a pre-recorded talk becomes a really good part of your record. Personally, I much prefer to give talks live because I don't want to have to do this again. I've decided today I'm only recording this once, which is why you've heard me make many mistakes throughout this talk. If I was giving this live, I wouldn't care. It's just how I do it. But at the end of the day, it's up to you. Now, if you want to look at sources of inspiration for really good public speakers to maybe inspire you, or to inspire you to maybe be a better speaker, or inspire you for design, YouTube's your source, man. YouTube has so much amazing educational content, and it runs a wide variety of styles as well. Eric Lander is a MIT professor who teaches molecular biology, and he is an amazing speaker. I have watched his entire course on the fundamentals of biology, and he's just so engaging. But he doesn't have any visuals. Well, he doesn't have any fancy visuals. He's just a guy in front of a chalkboard, but he is able to describe things in such a way that it pulls you in and it really helps you understand what's going on. A good lecture is like this. On the other side of the scale, we have Crash Course. Crash Course teaches you small subjects on a wide variety of topics, ranging from history and literature to engineering and science. And these are animated with a teacher and a lecturer talking you through the different subjects. They're really good at explaining complicated subjects simply. There's also people like Johnny Harris here. He talks about travel and history and journalism. And he takes his deep dives into a subject and will lay them out for you visually. And he'll take you through different graphs or different animations to explain his topics. But the Mac Daddy of all of these things are TED Talks. Now, TED Talks are going to be the closest thing to the types of talks you're going to be giving. They're not going to be exactly the same because TED is a very specific in-house style, but they're the closest to the kind of presentation you are going to be giving, a person talking with slides, and that's it. When I am giving my presentations, I like to do them a mix between a TED Talk and some of the other YouTubers that I have mentioned here. If you want to see more about the YouTubes that I find inspiration for, I've got links in the doobly-doo below, but those are the main things that I go to for inspiration on how to give a modern type of talk with visuals, in addition to all the training that I had speaking on the radio. Well, thank you so much for listening to my talk today. If you want more information, feel free to email me. My email address is right here on the screen, or feel free to tweet me. I am at Brunsmore until I finish my dissertation. I have already held at Dr. Brunsmore, which maybe by the time you're videoing this, maybe the time you're seeing this, will already be up there. So happy presentations. I know you can do it. Don't worry about mistakes. I just made a bunch of them. Have a good day and cheers.